Hello, everyone in Iconic Land, and welcome to this another episode of Exploring Glorantha. I am James, your host, and with me, as always, is my Lancor, my scholar, Evan. Evan, welcome back. Thanks for taking time out, as always. If you are a member of the Iconic Patronage, you get access to Evan's syllabus. It's not even an outline; it is a syllabus on these episodes, and so hopefully you guys are enjoying following along at home. And today we're continuing, as we mentioned last week or last month, we're going to do a physical tour of Dragon Pass, and then we're going to do a temporal tour of Dragon Pass. Again, the goal here is to provide bite-sized chunks of Dragon Pass so that you can just say, hey, this area is cool, here's why it's cool, I can start running a game here immediately. And much like the movement rune, we started in Sartar, we're kind of coming up to Tarsh, we're going to go over to Prax next month, into Esrolia, up into the Beastland or the Grazelands, and then into the Lunar Empire. So Evan, how are you doing this morning?
Doing very well.
You ready to explore some Glorantha, you filthy, filthy lunar lover? I see your
Oh,
t-shirt.
I mean, today I will be playing the Aripi Ontour Sage, but
Oh, that's right.
yes.
I mean, I'm wearing my
Uh,
Odyssey t-shirt, but clearly that's Orland on my shirt.
yeah, whatever.
Immediately,
Has
conflict arises in
has
exploring
been
Glorantha.
God.
That's right. Hey, listen, they say conflict in on Twitch and in YouTube videos is what drives content. So
Oh,
we're going to manufacture some, as
there we go.
this side is definitely the Orlanth side, and that side is the filthy, filthy lunar side. But we're going to be talking about Tarsh, and so Tarsh is a sister kingdom to Sartar in the fact that they both have some of the same root struggles. They have some of the same beliefs, but essentially, Tarsh is split, which I loved because there's so much symbolism in Tarsh with the twin dynasty, right? And we're going to talk about that. But so there's a twin dynasty. There are two Tarshes, essentially. There is the Lunar Tarsh, which is the Tarsh that is, a province of the Lunar Empire. It holds a possible future for Sartar. This is what it would look like for an Orlanthi people to be subjugated by the Lunar Empire. And then there's the Old Tarsh, the people who are holding to the old ways. They're rebellious. They've got that Orlanthi, that good Orlanthi spirit that kind of, to provoke change and bring back the winds to blow back the stench of the lunar north back into the north where it came from. But yeah, so Tarsh is ripe with intrigue. And so if you like Sartar but want something a little that has, it's an older kingdom, something that has a little bit more refined, it's still not as established, if you will, as sort of like I'm trying to think of like a medieval, it's not the Holy Roman Empire, it's not more of a medieval setting. It's still a Bronze Age setting, but it's much more like Sumer, Babylon, Assyria, in the fact that it has a lot of political intrigue. It has been around long enough. The hierarchy hasn't been destroyed. The bureaucracy is still there. It is rife for intrigue and rebellion plots and coups and assassinations and backstabbings and just wonderful, wonderful magical assassinations. So Evan, I have just spent the first 9 minutes of this rambling about how much I love Tarsh and Orlanth. Why don't you give us, how would you separate Lunar and Old Tarsh for people who may not be familiar with that?
Well, so of course there's physical
Hmm.
separation. There's cultural and sort of spiritual separation. Um, here is the completely inapt, but still sort of in the realm modern um, uh, analogy, which is Lunar Tarsh is mainland China and Old Tarsh is Taiwan.
Mm,
except that they're not separated by an ocean. They're
right.
separated by mountains and difficult terrain. But
Yes.
basically, you know, it wasn't that there weren't people living up in the sort of difficult terrain before, but the rejectionists who lost out to the folks that embraced the lunar way, retreated. Sort of there's a mix of the sort of hardy mountain dwellers, and loyalists around their most sacred sites at the
Mm-hmm.
base of Mount Carofin, which is a physical mountain that is 10 kilometers high,
Yeah.
a needle up into the sky, and there's a great earth temple, and then there's the sort of old royal fortress, the Wintertop Fort, that is there, and then that's the stronghold, and the elites who didn't want to go the lunar way, retreated up there and sort of set up their mini kingdom in
Mm-hmm.
opposition there. And then meanwhile, down in the lowlands, um, particularly around the Oslira River, um, uh, and the rich uh, valley bottoms, that it's the wealthy part of the nation. You have an increasingly civilized and uh, imperial facing uh, set of cities under a strong kingship that is it's independent of the Lunar Empire in that it is not an incorporated province. It's a client kingdom.
Yes.
Um, but the leadership is related to the highest levels of the lunar elite, and so they have connections to power, to spiritual power, magical power, trade, economics, military
Mm-hmm.
force, um, and in some ways, uh, the holdouts, uh, comparatively, Old Tarsh is maybe 10% of the size of Lunar Tarsh.
Right. They've been
Uh,
they've been
yeah,
occupied and indoctrinated,
yeah,
um, and brought into the fold. Right. I say indoctrinated
definitely.
because I'm an Orlanthe. You would say enlightened.
Enlightened. They have
But
been educated
they've been
and
educated. But
liberated.
liberated. Yeah. So it definitely has, again, for me, this feeling of Sumer or Babylon, and the fact that, like, along the river you have all of these massive cities, and right, it's no larger than Sartar, but as Evan kind of pointed out in our show notes, that it's got twice the population density. So again, if you want something that's a little less barbaric field, right? Because the Orlanthe, they're looked down on the Lunars as barbarians. Yes, they have these cities, but Sartar is a couple of points of light, and then just the majority of it is, wilderness tulas, small villages, that kind of thing. Tarsh has more of this cosmopolitan, city-centric view to it.
And
Now,
it's
there's a couple. Oh, go ahead. Sorry, Evan.
well, and it's dominated by a completely lunarized city,
Mm-hmm.
what would be seen as a modern, planned, designed city that has the greatest population within Dragon Pass. Now, if you get out down into the Holy Country, there are, Notchet is perhaps the greatest city in the
Right.
world. 100,000 people. Glamour up in the center of the Lunar Empire, also a population of about 100,000. But so those are incredible metropolises. But within the pass, Boldholm, the capital of Sartar, is 11,000, and furthest, the capital of Tarsh, the city of 20,000, within a surrounding population of another 100,000 that all look towards this city, a whole third of the population of Tarsh. And it is an incredible um, engine for
Mm-hmm.
economy and culture, and and lunar propaganda.
And good morning to John Doom. Good to see you in the chat. So there are two big features that I want to talk about in Tarsh, geographic, physical features, because they define Tarsh. The first is let's start with the natural one, the beautiful one, the one that is not a foreign invading thing, the Oslier River. So much like the Euphrates and the Tigris, the Nile, um, the rivers where trade springs up. It's where cities spring up, not just for trade, but also because transport and food. The Oslier River was, again, this is Glorantha. Nothing happens just because that's the way geography works, in our geological things work in our world. This river is where Orlanth slew the blue dragon. Right? That's why this river is so massive. It flows thousands of miles. It starts, it goes through Peloria, Daraharpa, eventually reaching the sea. It's a massive tributary, or not tributary, it's a massive waterway, if you will, of communication, of trade, of travel. This is the lifeblood of the region. And it also provides for everyone there. Fish, fertile ground, trade is coming in. So if you're setting a game in Tarsh, unlike Sartar, where you're really dealing more with the mountains, how do we get around the mountains? Where is everything in relation to Boldholm, which is kind of in the center of all of these mountain ranges? Travel is a lot easier along the Oslier River. And again, the fact that the river is the last remnant of a great blue dragon slew by Orlanth in God time is metal. And let's Evan, this came up in our Glorantha game that we got to play at Chaosium Con. The Lunars don't have a great track record when it comes to rivers.
Yeah.
You want to talk about that just a little bit?
Sure. Oh, I mean, so the Oslier and one of its another major river that joins with it, the Black Eel. They are not only mythological
Mm-hmm.
beings with patron spirits or gods, but they are also magical ecosystems, and they have uh, both the Black Eel and the Oslier resisted um, uh, being dominated by any number of groups. You have to learn how to appease or work around, or sometimes to defeat. Um, and the Lunars, they're just the best at everything. And there were inhabitants within the rivers, not anymore, because they refuse to submit, they refuse to cooperate, and um, so the next step is annihilation, and that's exactly what the Lunars did. The dwellers within those rivers were apparently completely vanquished. Now in Glorantha, things are not necessarily always gone forever. Things sometimes come back. Things might be found in God time, or locked away somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
But right now, the total dominion and control of these waterways is assured by the spiritual and
Right.
magical might of the empire.
Right. I mean, we've seen it. I mean, just in our previous discussions, right? Orlanth is killed but comes back. Uh, the Red Goddess was brought back from the God time, even though she has been dead. Now, speaking of the Red Goddess and Tarsh, we can't talk about the two of these things. We can't talk about the Lunars and Tarsh without talking about the Glowline. So I'm going to start talking about it, and then Evan will enlighten me and the rest of you. Just remember, this whole video is probably rife, and the outline is probably rife with lunar rituals and riddles trying to make you illuminated. So Orlanthe should be on their guard through this whole thing. Um, so the glow line, lunar magic, is tied to the phases of the moon. Now, again, the moon doesn't get blocked by Glorantha, it actually changes color from red to black, and that's how we get this the cycle of the moon. But the Lunars not really satisfied with the fact that, you know, half the week they're at below half strength and half, you know, the week they're super powerful, have come up with this. Now I'm gonna call it abominable magics to create. I'm sorry, Evan. I know I'm just needling you because in the pre-show, Evan's like, "Oh, look, you're wearing almost a lunar-colored shirt. I'm wearing you down," and so immediately my Sartorite hackles, which you cannot see, but it is a fantasy game, so I have long flowing hackles, were up. So the glow line within this perimeter, it is sort of the metaphysical boundary of the Lunar Empire. And as the Lunar Empire conquers more territories physically, they extend the glow line. And within the glow line, the moon is always full. Lunar magic is always at its strongest. But Evan, as the scholar of the Lunar Way, would you like to expand upon, well, please don't expand the glow line, just expand upon the glow line.
Sure. So, so the glow line is generated. You know, there is a physics to this. The glow line was not always a feature of the empire.
It used to be a bug.
Yeah, well, that's yeah. So the cyclical nature of the moon is something that, you know, is accepted, but it proved a great vulnerability with the invasion of the horse nomads, led by their semi-divine ruler Sheng Celeris.
Mm-hmm.
And so one of the things that the empire did, that the Red Emperor did, was that he produced, I believe it was his third, might have been the second, but third inspiration. No, it must have been the second inspiration. Could have been the third. Um, uh, uh, and this
Lunar
is the
trickery.
goddess.
He's trying to confuse you.
This is the goddess Yara Aranis, who
Mm-hmm.
is the goddess of the reaching moon. So she is there to terrify the horse nomads and to provide the power to you know, balance out their trickery and use of spirits, etc. And so she has the secret of building the temples of the reaching moon, which generate and expand the glow line. So that's what they were trying to do in Sartar, was they were building a temple to the reaching moon. Unfortunately, they built it on top of a dragon that woke up and, well,
Got what it
ate
deserved.
ate ate half the lunar army that was present, and all of the senior leadership, etc., and just, you know, destroyed the temple. Fell down into the crater from which the dragon had emerged.
Now, fun fact, as we all know, the iconic dragon is the logo of Iconic Productions, and some say it's the white from 13th Age.
Yeah.
During the Exploring Glorantha show, it's definitely the dragon that was under the Temple of the Reaching Moon. That is how we honor that dragon.
There you go. As Jorg made sure to point out in the comments, is the brown dragon.
Mm-hmm.
Not any of the other dragons, the green or the black
Or the red.
But so the Temple of the Reaching Moon was established. One of the first things, so the foundations of a new Temple of the Reaching Moon was laid by the first lunar king in Tarsh as a toddler, basically. You know, wisely guided by his lunar advisors, etc., etc. So Tarsh is within the glow line. Now, what the guide to Glorantha says, and it's not always clear in all of the materials. It says that the glow line keeps the power of the lunars at the power of the half moon, which is basically on par. They don't suffer any detriment, but they're not turbocharged by the full moon. it's unclear in the materials, and we're waiting for more details whether or not within the glow line the full moon, which I think would be the case, that the power of the full moon still empowers the followers of the goddess, but
That's how I've
otherwise,
always run it.
yeah. And the way I'd run it too. Some people do think that or have thought that the glow line keeps the turbocharge on all the time. I That seems to be contradicted by the Guide to Glorantha, which is our foundational document for
Right.
discussing Glorantha.
Yeah, as long as
Um,
nothing newer contradicts the guide.
right.
The,
Well, it used to be called getting Gregged, but
yeah,
our uh, late and well of great memory, Greg Stafford is not here to change things, but Glorantha is a place that evolves and develops as new and interesting ideas
yes,
fit into them, and we have people who are engaging with it, and hopefully we're getting new people to
that's
come
right. That's
and
right.
engage with it. So the glow line covers all of Lunar Tarsh for the greater part. It does not reach uh, Old Tarsh, at least not yet.
Not
It
yet.
was going to be covered by the glow line when they were going to extend it all through Sartar, but uh, that runs into problems.
That
Um,
does.
Nonetheless, that this as a client kingdom, that it be covered by the glow line shows the vast importance of Tarsh, the the strategic and magical importance, and the investment that the empire has put towards it, and that's also exemplified by how close the ruling family is to to uh, the rules of the empire, um, the kings of Tarsh being descended in multiple ways from the Red Emperor. So,
Right. Can you repeat that just quickly? You broke up just a little bit.
oh, okay. Well, just the fact that there's a Temple of the Reaching Moon in
Mm-hmm.
Tarsh means it shows the investment and the
Mm-hmm.
importance of this client kingdom to the empire, and which is also exemplified by how closely
Right.
aligned the ruling elite is to the ruling elite of the empire, with the kings being descended directly from the Red Emperor.
Yeah. And so when we talk about Tarsh, we say that they're sort of, let's call them cousins to the Sartorites. Because while the Sartorites are Hjortlings and Orlanthi, the Tarsh are Orlanthi, but they're not really Hjortlings. Although at various points throughout their history, Sartar and Tarsh have been strong allies. Um, there are 20 tribes, they're scattered throughout. If you remember the Patreon, there's a ton of great information here in the outline that gets shared with our patrons as we go forward from there. But let's get into, let's talk a little bit about Furthest. Because Furthest is, well, let's start the history, right? The history of what happened here that was awesome. It gets founded by Arim the Pauper, who is my favorite king of Tarsh because of his name. I love the name Arim the Pauper. Now he comes in, right? We've talked about this. We're going to cover it more in our temporal view of Dragon Pass. That at the end of the Second Age, Dragon Pass gets closed. Uh, Not physically, but sort of, we don't want to go there so we don't get eaten by dragons, kind of a way. But as at the same time that people are coming in to Dragon Pass, Arm the Pauper enters Dragon Pass from the north as opposed to the direction that the Sartorites came from, and he crosses it in desperation. Why is he so desperate? Why is he a pauper here, Evan?
Well, so he came from an area called Serd, and there are a variety of now lunar provinces that
Mm-hmm.
were there, and those provinces were being in the course of being conquered by the conquering daughter, a daughter of the Red Emperor, Warren Dalthippa, who was building roads and conquering lands, expanding the empire. And so Aram and people like him were fleeing the invasions and seeking, they realized that they were uh, unequal to standing against this semi-divine conqueror. Um,
Oh, Evan. I think I might have lost Evan. I will jump in. Um,
and
oh, here you're back.
looking for warned by his ancestors not to go there. Oh,
Oh,
hello.
you cut out for a second there, Evan.
Oh, and you looked frozen. So, friends, so very much like Sartar, on the one hand, somebody who is able to meet new and unusual individuals, meets a centaur, he meets a Grayslander. He starts to form, essentially an adventuring party. Um, and then he meets this divine priestess in the secret earth temple at the basis of Carofin, mother of mountains, mother of Orlanth, mother of Yenkin. um, and this is the Shaker Temple. So for the terrifying earth goddess Marin Gore, who is the uh, whose sacred are the earth shakers, the dinosaurs, and who is in control of earthquakes and destruction. And there is a secret cult within many earth cults uh, of of human sacrifice,
Mm-hmm.
which in the chaos episode, uh, we learned that's bad. That brings chaos. Well,
Right.
there is a way to approach the gods um, using secret earth rites in order to offer human sacrifice. And Sarana Tor, the semi-divine priestess that he meets there, um, is is the high priestess not only of the for the earth there, but also of these secret rites. So he could have ended up sacrificed, but instead he romances her and wins her favor, marries her, becomes the sacred king of Dragon Pass,
Mm-hmm.
and founds the tribal groups. This allows others to join him, and he founds this kingdom.
And his line continues for quite a while. The Twin Dynasty. He has
Yes.
twins. They found the they rule for quite a while, but then they are slain. The Twin Dynasty comes to an end, and the whole thing falls into civil war for a while. Tarsh then becomes a matriarchal theocracy, right? For a bit under the
Well,
Shaker
yeah,
Temple,
that's attempted, and it's a total disaster.
right? And then
I
the oh, go ahead.
oh, I would want. So Tarsh is constantly in dialogue with the Lunar Empire.
Mm-hmm.
So um the Twin Dynasty, the twins that are the children of Sarana Tor and Aram, um wipe out a lunar army that seeks to
Mm-hmm.
invade Tarsh at the Battle of Falling Hills. Much like the Dragon Kill War, it is what it says on the box. A bunch of hills fell on the Lunar Imperial Army because these twin children had enormous connections with the Earth.
Right.
Um, and it was a raid of one of their descendants who went into the Lunar Empire. Raiding against the Lunar Empire was very typical. um, and and he unleashes a horror that had been created by the Lunar Empire but contained. He accidentally lets it go, he gets killed by it, it's this place called the Mad Sultanate,
It's just
and they are the remnants of a chaos warped army. And we'll talk about that later. But in any case, it is a total disaster because Tarsh is left leaderless,
mm-hmm.
and one after another claimant comes forward, only to be overthrown or to have a misadventure. And it's 7 years of total disorder.
Well, and I mean, I know we're getting the big Dragon Pass campaign, the Sartar campaign. I really want a Tarsh box. Just
Mm.
tossing that out there to Chaosium if you're listening. Rick, next time we have you on the show, I'm definitely going to be pushing for that. So this matriarchal theocracy fails. And in 1455, they manage to reincarnate Serana Tor, who then weds and supports Alaro, who becomes the Alaro dynasty. And that lasts less than 50 years. Like, it's not a... They go through, what is it, 2, 4... They go through 5 kings in 50 years. And again, like we said, Tarsh has this political intrigue sort of baked into it. And then the Lunars come in and they support this viceroy and they start what is known as the Lunar Kings. And that's where we're... Oh, go ahead, Evan.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, on the one hand, it's true. The Alaro dynasty, as originally conceived, um, sort of ends with the entrance of the Lunar Kings. On the other hand, you could say that it never ended because their bloodline
Right.
is still a troll, but the dot of it is the lunar influence, because actions of the sort of last independent Tarshite king, Pajim Sab, who ends up entranced by the demigoddess Han Il, who now Sor and the Shaker Temple and the secret to human sacrifice, that's important
Yeah.
in Tarsh. Well, Hanil comes and said, I can do human sacrifice too, but for the enlightened lunar way. And she enchants Pajim Sab, he marries her, and then he disappears. It seems very likely that she sacrificed him, for power and control, and then their offspring becomes the first Lunar King.
Right, and this was actually the big focus of the game we played at Chaosium, which again, I really would love to see in publication. I would love to run that game adventure for a group. So that's our overview of the history of Tarsh, the big places. Why? Yeah, we're about halfway through. We're on point, Evan. It's because the barbarians keep charging forward, while the Lunars just want to keep expounding. I realize I'm needling you
We
real
make
hard.
the caravans run on time.
You do make the caravans run on time. So why would you want to play in Tarsh? Well, I've said for me, I love the dichotomy of Tarsh. I love the fact that, one, its population is dense enough that it is a great place for political intrigue. You have the Lunars are there, you have the Orlanthi are there, you have the Sartorites to the south, you have all of this trade. If you are the kind of GM who loves political intrigue, if you're Richard and you want to run a game about building an economic empire, this is the place to set it. But you also have the Old Tarsh versus Lunar Tarsh. You have this idea of the conflict between the old ways that are still alive in the mountains that eventually sort of win out because, right, when Argrath shows up, he basically throws in with the Lunar Tarshites or not the Lunar Tarshites, haha, Evan's getting to me. He throws in with the Old Tarshites after he consolidates power in Sartar, because he overthrows the Lunar Empire. So you have, if you want to play rebels, You can do that. If you want to play, Evan put in our notes that it is the gateway to the Lunar Empire. It is a way to introduce the Lunars, not necessarily as an adversary, right? In Sartar, the Lunars are clearly the invaders. In Tarsh, the Lunars have been around for almost 200 years at this point, and they are just a fact of life. There are lunar temples, there's the Shaker temples. You have the fact that your kings keep going missing because they're wedding lunar priestesses. But all in all, it is a less volatile relationship between the Lunars and the Orlanthi. And there's probably... Oh, go ahead, Evan.
Well, you can just hop on a barge at
Mm-hmm.
furthest and sail all the way to the heart of the empire. If that's, I mean, the thing is that, it is not an, in the scale of Bronze Age travel, it is not an arduous trip.
Mm-hmm.
There is a clear and easy way to take a tour through, all of the different shades of this side of the empire and end up in its glittering capital,
Would you say
Glamour.
it's glamorous?
It is absolutely glamorous.
Yes.
And of course, on the Johnstown's Compendium,
Mm-hmm.
there are a bunch of excellent source books to help support that.
Mm-hmm.
So a little hard for a bunch of rebel Sartorites to go visiting the Lunar Empire.
Right.
On the other hand, Tarshites, very welcome,
Yeah.
probably all along the way. That doesn't mean that you have to be necessarily pro-lunar. The thing is that we're seeing in this sort of uh, uh, struggle for authority. It's the old Tarshites are benefiting from
Mm-hmm.
the split between the king and his uncle, Spazir Widered, who is the most talented general of his time.
He is one
Um,
of my favorite NPCs and characters in
but
all of
he
Gloranthan lore.
but he is a loyal follower of the lunar war god,
Mm-hmm.
but becoming disenchanted with the Lunar Empire. So
Mm-hmm.
there is this split to not only, the Lunar Empire is a powerful theocratic force, but it is not the only way to be a good lunar, so to
Mm-hmm.
speak. We see that in the starting characters. We have a character who is a lunar Tarshite,
Right.
but who is presented as someone to adventure with the Hysrolians and Praxians and Sartorites because this is a time of change.
Yeah.
So you might not be completely sold on the Lunar Empire. You might nonetheless worship lunar gods, and you might be going into the heart of the Lunar Empire to see what's going on, to try and moderate uh, what it's doing, or to find some way to break with it politically without losing your spiritual path.
Right. There is a it's sort of, in my mind, analogous to kind of the Roman Empire in one of the farther provinces. I think of Paul in Acts, who is able to appeal to the Roman Empire because he's a Roman citizen. This is sort of like what we see in the Tarshite. You are not the outsiders that the Sartorites are. You're a province of the Lunar Empire with all of the responsibilities, but also the benefits that they enjoy. And you're not worried about, right? When the Lunars plan to crush Sartar, the idea is that they're going to just brutally tax them and oppress the people. But in Tarsh, they've been a part of the empire for so long. Yeah, they pay their provincial tax, but it's not this crushing, break the will of the people. You are now part of the Lunar Empire. I also see sort of a relation in my mind between oh man, who is it Eteres? The trade goddess. Eteres deals with Tarsh. The penitents are what is in store for Sartar because they've resisted for so long. we will break you and then bring you into the lunar way, as opposed to now you've been part of the lunar way long enough, please enjoy all of these the trade and the wealth and the enlightenment that we bring. But if you're a fan of Star Wars, I would recommend playing in Old Tarsh, because the Old Tarshites, they are not, even though they only represent about 10% of the kingdom, they don't represent a spiritually or weak faction. You have people who are supporting this, including things like the Shaker Temple. There is powerful magics in Old Tarsh, which is why they are not able to be stamped out. If you want to run the rebel campaign of we're going to overthrow the people who have taken our country, Tarsh is a different feel than the sort of unified resistance to the lunar military force and theocratic force that you have in Sartar. This is more of an intrigue, a strategic rebellion, as opposed to a large scale open warfare rebellion that we see in Sartar.
And so that, there's a couple of very important points. Sartar is this important bastion of Orlanthe belief, etc. But
Mm-hmm.
the most important holy places are in Tarsh.
Mm-hmm.
Orlanth was
Carofin.
born
Yeah.
on the slopes of Mount Carofin. His mother is physically there.
Mm-hmm.
Marin Gore is physically present, ample. So these are enormously powerful spiritual locations, and the Tarsh exiles control them.
Yeah.
They're not so cut off. I mean, they're still receiving pilgrims from far away, from Orlanthe
Mm-hmm.
bastions, who are bringing news or bring magic, bring some sort of wealth that is keeping them going. And
Yeah.
they are, it's an impoverished area. They have to hunt, they have to live off the land. It's not good farmland, although they have some. So it's a hard scrabble life that makes them, sometimes bitter and vengeful, hard drinkers, and yet they have that um, hospitality
Yes.
and brotherhood feeling, and this respectful balance between the terrifying power of the female vengeful earth,
Yeah.
with Marin Gore and Babeester Gore, and the protector Orlanth, and particularly, of course, Yinkin, Orlanth's
Right.
half brother, was also born there, and so the very close tie with the Shadow Cats.
Right.
So it's a fascinating area.
So if I were going to run a game in Tarsh, and it wasn't going to be focused on sort of the experience, because one of the great things about playing in Glorantha, and especially playing in RuneQuest Glorantha, is that one, it's primed for a grand campaign, but two, it is less focused on the adventure and more focused on the experience of living in the world. So if you want to set your game in furthest and have, political intrigue and as we said, sort of trade wars and religious debates where you're trying to convert people to the lunar way or prevent them from falling into the lunar way, that is ripe for that. There's also, Old Tarsh versus Lunar Tarsh in the cities. But if you're playing Old Tarsh and you want to go out into the wilds, there's plenty of things to do. And for me, one of the main things, especially the last couple of times I've run RuneQuest, is the idea that you cannot win alone. This is not the RuneQuest is really not the story. Glorantha is not the story of 5 plucky heroes who go off and adventure around and save the world. Even Orlanth couldn't do that. Orlanth required allies. Argrath spends years gathering the political, the military, and the spiritual allies needed to ascend to become the king of Sartar. So there are plenty of places for your characters to go out and explore and gather allies, especially if you're Old Tarsh, against the Lunars. You've got Dragonutes sort of throughout um, Tarsh. The Grayslands are near Tarsh, and we'll get to them more in depth in a couple of episodes of Exploring Glorantha. One of the coolest and craziest country, Black Horse Country. Evan, can you just give us a high overview of Saint, or not Saint, Lord Ethelrist? Because
Yeah.
I love Black Horse Country.
So Lord Ethelrith is a hero with a capital H. He
Mm-hmm.
has been to hell and back. He seems to be, virtually immortal.
Yeah.
And he came from the West, so he's out of the Western tradition of believing in the invisible God,
Mm-hmm.
having being attended by sorcerers and magicians who directly interact with the runes in order to invoke their power, bypassing the gods. And he has a mercenary company of exceptionally trained uh, cavalry who are mounted not on horses, but on demon steeds, which he
Mm-hmm.
won in hell and brought back with him. And one of the things that Jonathan and Rob talk about in
Yeah.
13th Age Glorantha is that, the writers are sort of secondary. It's the demon steeds that you really have to be worried about.
Right.
Yes, yes, okay, there's something that looks sort of like a cataphract or a knight on its back, but what's really scary is that there's a demon that
Right.
is charging towards you, and so um, he he is a mercenary. He sort of has worked for everybody. He's worked for the Lunar Empire. He's been betrayed by the Lunar Empire. He and he was sort of introduced in the board game
Mm-hmm.
White Bear, Red Moon, or Dragon Pass. And 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 he kind of goes to the highest bidder.
Right.
He is not an idealist. He is a realist who is most interested in himself, his own power, and uh, wealth,
Yep.
and the control of his little territory. But it's exceptional because of its leader, and he has collected a lot of power and things through his adventures.
Yeah. And again, just go search on Lord Ethelrist. There's a ton of great information. If you have the guide to Glorantha, you'll have even more. Other things, allies, you have elves who definitely hate the Lunars, trolls, half trolls, the Tusk Raiders, and then Balazar, which, if you can get your hands on a copy of Griffin Mountain or the Moon Design reprint of Griffin Mountain, that's all you need to run a campaign. Balazar is an amazing territory. It is even more primitive than kind of the Bronze Age, but you have these hunters. They love dogs, which is something that the Orlanthi barely stomach. Uh, but Griffin Mountain is in there. What's the giant who
Okay, well, Gon Orta,
Gon
who
Orta is up there?
is a primal giant who is basically almost turned into a mountain
Right.
now, but he has a castle hidden up, sort of at the periphery of the lands of Balazar. And Balazar is important because
The Windsword
for
is
a
up there.
variety of reasons. Well,
Yeah.
the wind sword is up there,
Yeah.
but it's a poor, like nobody wants to conquer it particularly because there's no profit in it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but um, but it's right adjacent to Lunar Tarsh,
Mm-hmm.
and there's a back and forth. Some tribes, some clans there are sort of aligned with the Lunars. They provide their well-regarded scouts and skirmishers to recruit from there because of their hunting prowess. But on the other hand, a bunch of them, resent the Lunars and their intrusion to their land. Tarsh is really the one of the interfaces with
Right.
Balazar, and so there could be some allies, or at least places you could hide out. If you know, say you went on a mission from Old Tarsh, it went bad, you couldn't get back up into the mountains, you had to flee. Go to Balazar.
Right.
So
So we've got about 10 minutes left. I'm going to cover my favorite adventure ideas and themes, and then Evan, you cover yours. Now, if you want more information about Tarsh, there is information in the RuneQuest, the Adventures in Glorantha book about Tarsh. In fact, it's one of the starting um, cultures you can play in. There's information in 13th Age Glorantha. There's information in the Gloranthan source book. There's information in the Guide to Glorantha. Is there any other places that you would want to point GMs if they want more information on Tarsh, Evan?
I think you pretty much covered them all. You said King of Sartar, right?
Oh yeah,
That's
there's a ton of information in
oh
King of Sartar. I did
yeah.
not mention that, but I'm going
Okay.
to
Well, I'll
retroactively
mention
said
that.
I did. No, go ahead.
No. Well, I mean, yeah, King of Sartar
Mm-hmm.
covers a lot of things in depth, particularly the King list and the various events that occurred, and all of those have, you know, tantalizing ties to uh, you know, potential for adventure ideas or even campaign ideas. Um, there are a number of older, you know, publications, fan publications.
Mm-hmm.
There's one called Tarsh War, which I've never cracked open, but is much beloved from the Tales of the Reaching Moon period. And there were a couple of publications from a group called the Unspoken Word, Tarsh in Flames,
Mm,
and Wintertop Fair. I guess if you run across those, I mean, they are, you know, not official, but you know, a lot of creative people put, you know, effort into fan works. That this is the Hero Wars, early Hero Quest
right.
period of Glorantha, where they were using those rule sets. Those could be very interesting for uh, is. And you know, you just never know what's coming out on the Johnstown Compendium.
Right.
There hasn't been a lot very focused on Tarsh, but maybe we'll see some. Hey, someone enterprising might come out with a mini Tarsh pack. JM will buy it.
I will buy it. You got at least one sale. So, for GMs, one of the things that I said I loved about this is that Tarsh is full of dualities, and if you've been paying attention at all through this adventure, you'll see a lot of them. Old Tarsh, Lunar Tarsh, Lunar Way, the Shaker Temple, the King and the General, which Evan talked about, the Highlands where Old Tarsh is, and the low river valleys where the cities are. Um, there's a lot to tease out and build a campaign around, right? It was founded by a twin dynasty, and this duality continues to today. And I love I mean, even Evan's discussion on the different ways of human sacrifice as access to the power of the gods in an acceptable way as opposed to a chaotic way. These are things that as a GM I would like to play with. You could pick any one of these dualities and build an adventure, if not an entire campaign about. And the thing that's great about the dualities here is it's not like in Sartar, right? Sort of in Sartar, the main duality is Orlanth versus Chaos, right? That's the main conflict. Here, we have, it's not as stark. There are benefits and drawbacks to each side of the duality. And so when your characters get involved in this, it allows for a little bit more shades of gray, more convincing of people, more nuance than sort of the starker lands to the south. It is a more cosmopolitan region, which allows for a more nuanced look at these discussions. In fact, one of my characters in my RuneQuest game, Beth, was playing Durlindia, and Durlindia was an old Tarshite and was trying to actually find and bring back the last heir of the twin dynasties. She hated the Lunars, but could actually, I mean, even her character, now that I'm thinking about it, she was a follower of Babista Gore, but was also a philosopher. So she kind of had this duality within herself, the high-minded philosophy from being raised in Lunar Tarsh, but the very almost rage-filled, barbaric, vengeance-driven acts of, well, literally acts of Babista Gore. So I think there's a lot of nuance there that I love to unpack and tease about as a GM. If that's something that you enjoy, if you enjoy the political intrigue, hopefully you're here at the end of this episode furiously taking notes about your new Tarsh campaign, which we would love to hear about. Leave notes in the chat. So Evan, what for Tarsh as a GM do you think is kind of the most exciting thing about running a game, or adventure ideas for running a game in Tarsh?
Well, I think for me, it's to run it in Lunar Tarsh, and uh, with the sort of breakdown of the relationships uh, between the king
Mm-hmm.
and the general, those factions
Yeah.
of where um, both are nominally, loyal clients
Mm-hmm.
to the Lunar Empire, but there's been this beginning of, sort of paranoia, like, oh, like, you know, General Wide Red, he's too popular, he's too powerful, even though, he's virtuous and has shown himself loyal again and again. The Lunars have put him aside. They have put lesser individuals in charge, and see what happened. They all got eaten by a dragon.
Right.
um
And there's a
and
growing dissent among Wide Red and again, not with their loyalty to the theology of the Lunar Empire, but with, so
yeah,
again, another duality, Evan, sorry to interrupt, is the
no, no,
white
not at
moon
all.
versus the red moon, right?
Oh,
That
oh,
is that
yes.
is when we get to the Lunar Empires, there are people in the Lunar Empire who's like, the Empire has served its purpose. We need to let it die so that the world can embrace uh, the goddess, and we're starting to see those come up in Tarsh as well. I apologize.
Yeah. So it's unclear whether or not Fazir and his sons or his clan are moving in the ambit of the White Moon. The White Moon is nominally a pacifist uh,
Mm-hmm.
uh, movement, although there are some strange things with that. But I think we'll explore that in one or more of our lunar episodes.
That's right.
But this allows us to sort of go into a lunarized, if not completely lunar atmosphere, play the politics, and also look at um, the many contradictions of lunar society.
Right.
The cultured, the peaceful,
Mm-hmm.
the wealth, wealthy and stable, sort of society, um, contrasted against all the things that prop that up. The sort of um, uh, ruthless bureaucracy, the militarism and expansionistic tendencies, and the sort of ruthless use of chaos to terrorize. The red bat, the
Right.
crimson bat. It's a chaos demon from hell, and you feel it with political dissidents, criminals, um, and when desperate, you know, people that have no power.
Right.
Um, and that's also how you fuel the glow line. The human sacrifice going on in the temple of the reaching moon. That's where condemned criminals,
Yeah.
um, and again, political dissidents, etc. What if you have a wrongly accused person, and they are slated for not just sacrifice, but essentially being completely used up as sort of spiritual fuel,
Right.
and being confronted with that, maybe being, being very comfortable in, and then being confronted with that as sort of the political conflict between people who, if they could just get along and agree, like, if they put Fazir Rybred, back in charge of the military, Argrath would have a much harder time
Right.
uh, doing what he's going to do. Instead, it seems like they're alienating him and even more his family, and they are going to look elsewhere to defend themselves. And so it is a great, I think, uh, ambit for storytelling there.
Now, if you're thinking, JM, that's great. I didn't come here to exploring Glorantha to hear about civilization. I want more Bronze Age goodness. I really want even more weirdness. We've got you covered. Next month, we're looking at Prax. And Prax is, you got the tribes of Prax who are all, they write on different animals. We were going to talk about the Moracanth. We're going to talk a little bit about Pavis and Big Rubble and the Block and the Devil and Sun County. Yeah.
Absolutely.
We're going to talk about a lot of things in Prax, the River of Cradles. If you are a member of the Iconic Patronage, you can jump on. Not only do we talk about exploring Glorantha, but Ludo of the God Learners is on there as well, and he is always posting tons of great Glorantha episodes from his podcast, which is just amazing. And oh, excellent, John! I'm glad that you enjoyed it. We've got a ton of episodes on exploring Glorantha, and also there's a quick start for free. There's a solo adventure that you can go over to chaosium.com and play through RuneQuest Glorantha and see what you think. It's a solo adventure. It's a lot of fun. But yeah, Prax is going to be next. Hopefully, I can get Corey in the chat so he can talk about his Bolo Lizard writing barbarian who took too many blows to the head during character creation and is not entirely all there. But Evan, thank you. I know I ribbed you pretty hard. You came out of the gate with your lunar shirt on, and it just inspires rage in me because violence is always an option. But you would
Always
say
another
we are
way.
all us.
We
So
are all
we
us.
are all us. So until next time, this has been Exploring Glorantha. Please check out all the other great shows that we have on the Iconic Production channel. Tomorrow at 2 o'clock, we're going to be doing our review of Night's Black Agents on the Iconic podcast. Monday, we have more Deadlands. A riot is about to break out in Heaston Hill, and what will the posse do? We don't know. I don't know. Surely, I have very little control over these games. And then on Tuesday, the group will be in Tharcold, and they're about to start a fight with a Tharkoldu and a bunch of cyborgs. So we've got a lot of great things on Tuesday. We're going to finish up our discussion on high fantasy. So until next time, stay safe, stay healthy, stay gaming. Thank you as always to my excellent host, Evan. I always enjoy just hanging out and chatting Glorantha with you. The fact that we get to do this and hopefully inspire other people to explore Glorantha is actually just a side benefit for me because this is a world that I am deeply in love with, and I know Evan is deeply in love with. So hopefully we will be exploring Glorantha for years to come.